Hi everybody, welcome back to the channel. One story video today, full story with closure. Guy spends 3 months hand carving a chess set for his dad's 60th birthday. Every piece modeled after a family member. Dad opens it, says, "Huh, that's something," then spends the rest of the night showing off a store-bought watch from the golden child brother. Next morning, the chess set is in the trash. Still wrapped. What happens after is the real story. Timestamps below. Let's get into it. I spent 3 months building my dad a hand-carved chess set for his 60th. Found it in the trash the next morning. Still in the wrapping. My brother's store. Bought watch was on his wrist. I didn't say anything. I just never came back. So I spent 3 months building my dad a hand-carved chess set for his 60th birthday. Every piece was designed after someone in our family. Nights until 2 in the morning, sanding, shaping, detailing. He opened it at the party, said, "Huh, that's something," set it on the table next to the paper plates, and spent the rest of the night showing off the store-bought watch my brother gave him. Found the chess set in the trash the next morning, still in the wrapping. I didn't say anything. I just never came back. My name's Nolan. I'm 32. And this is the story of how I stopped trying to earn my father's love. Not because I ran out of love to give, but because I finally realized I was pouring it into a container that had no bottom. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. I grew up in a small town outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. My dad, Dale, was the kind of man who believed that love was something you earned, not something you were owed. He ran a small contracting business, built houses with his hands, and expected his sons to be cut from the same cloth. My older brother, Brody, was 3 years ahead of me, and everything my dad wanted in a firstborn. Tall, athletic, loud, confident. The kind of guy who'd walk into a room and own it before he even said a word. My mom, Diane, was sweet and well-meaning, but had this way of smoothing everything over that meant nothing ever actually got addressed. She was the rug, and all the family's problems got swept right under her. Then there was me. Quieter. I liked books. I liked building things with my hands too, but not houses. Wood carving, specifically. I started when I was about 12 after my grandfather, my mom's dad, taught me during a summer visit. Grandpa Earl was this gentle, patient man who smelled like cedar and pipe tobacco. He showed me how to take a block of wood and find the shape hiding inside it. I fell in love with it. By the time I was 16, I was making things that actually impressed people. Jewelry boxes, figurines, decorative pieces. It was my thing. My quiet, strange, apparently unimpressive thing. Because here's the deal. My dad never cared about it. Not once. Brody would come home with a second-place football trophy, and my dad would clear a spot on the mantle. I'd come home with a blue ribbon from the state fair for a hand-carved eagle, and my dad would say, "That's nice, bud," and go back to watching the game. I'm not saying he was cruel about it. He just treated my passion like a hobby I'd eventually outgrow, like collecting rocks or playing with action figures. Meanwhile, Brody's interests were treated like destiny. Brody went into the family business right after high school, started working with Dad, learning the trade, and within a few years they were like a two-man show. They'd go to job sites together, eat lunch together, come home and talk shop at the dinner table, while I sat there eating my mashed potatoes in silence. My mom would occasionally say something like, "Nolan got an A on his English paper," and my dad would nod without looking up. Cool. Thanks, Dad. I moved out at 18, got a small apartment, worked at a hardware store during the day, and carved at night. I started selling pieces online and at local craft markets. It wasn't a fortune, but it was mine. I also started teaching myself chess around that time. I'd always been interested in strategy games, and chess became this meditative thing for me. I'd play online, study openings, lose 1,000 times, and slowly get better. And somewhere along the way, the two passions merged. I started carving chess pieces. My first full set took me about 2 months. It was rough, honestly. The knights looked more like dogs than horses. But I kept at it. By the time I was 25, I was making sets that people were buying for $400 and $500. Custom work, themed sets, tournament quality boards. I even had a small following online. People appreciated the craftsmanship, the detail, the patience it took. Everyone except my dad. I'd bring pieces to family dinners. I'd show him photos. I'd tell him about orders I'd landed. He'd give me the same thin smile and say something like, "That's neat, Nolan. So Brody, how's the Henderson job going?" Every single time. like I was a commercial break between the parts of the show he actually wanted to watch. Brody, to his credit, wasn't actively trying to be the favorite. He just was. He was the one who followed in Dad's footsteps, who spoke his language, who could talk about load-bearing walls and permits over dinner. I spoke a different language entirely, and my dad never bothered to learn it. But I kept trying. Every birthday, every Father's Day, every Christmas, I made my dad something. A carved picture frame, a decorative box for his desk, a wall-mounted coat rack with hand-carved detail. He'd say thank you, put it somewhere, and I'd never see it displayed. I found the coat rack in the garage once, behind a stack of paint cans. The picture frame was in a junk drawer. The box was on a shelf in the basement, still wrapped in the tissue paper I'd put it in. But I kept telling myself the same line. Maybe the next one will be the one. Maybe if I make something truly incredible, he'll finally see me. So when my dad's 60th birthday started creeping up on the calendar, I got an idea. The most ambitious project I'd ever attempted. A full hand-carved chess set. Not just any set. Each piece was designed to represent someone in our family. The king was modeled after my grandfather Earl, the man who taught me everything. The queen was my grandmother. The bishops were my parents. The knights were Brody and me. The rooks were the two family houses, our childhood home and grandpa's cabin. The pawns were carved to look like tools, each one different, representing the trades and skills our family was built on. Hammers, saws, chisels, wrenches. I spent 3 months on it. 3 months of staying up until 2 in the morning, sanding, shaping, detailing. I hand-finished every piece with tung oil. I built the board from walnut and maple, alternating squares with precision joints that would have made a furniture maker proud. I even lined the inside of the box with velvet and engraved a small brass plate on the lid that read, "To Dad, 60 years of building things that last. Love, Nolan." I wrapped it carefully in brown craft paper and tied it with twine. I drove to my parents' house the night of the party feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Real stupid, vulnerable hope. The kind that makes you feel like a kid again, even when you know better. The party was nice. My mom had done the whole thing. Streamers, a cake from the bakery downtown, a playlist of my dad's favorite country songs. About 30 people showed up. Neighbors, guys from the job sites, a few cousins. Brody was there with his wife Whitney and their 2 kids. I showed up alone. I'd been single for about a year, which was another thing my dad liked to comment on. You'd find a girl if you put down the sandpaper once in a while. Hilarious. When it came time for gifts, Brody went first. He handed Dad a box and inside was a watch. A nice one, sure. A Seiko, probably $200. My dad's face lit up like Brody had just handed him the deed to a lake house. He put it on immediately, held his wrist up, showed everyone. "Now that's a watch," he said. "My boy knows what I like." Then it was my turn. I handed over the wrapped box. It was heavy. My dad took it, hefted it, and unwrapped it slowly. He opened the lid. He looked at the chess set. He looked at the pieces. He picked up the king, turned it over, set it back down. And he said, "Huh, that's something." Then he closed the lid, set it on the table next to the cake plates, and said, "Who wants another slice of cake?" That was it. That was the reaction to 3 months of my life carved into wood and handed over on a velvet-lined prayer. Huh, that's something. I stayed another hour. I smiled. I made small talk. I watched my dad show off his new watch to everyone who walked by, and then I went home. I sat in my truck in the driveway for a while. I didn't cry. I was past crying about it. I just felt hollow, like someone had scooped out everything inside me and left the shell sitting in the driver's seat. But that wasn't even the worst part. The worst part came the next morning. I went back to my parents' house because I'd left my jacket on the back of a kitchen chair. It was early, maybe 7:30. I figured I'd slip in, grab it, maybe have coffee with my mom if she was up. I pulled into the driveway and the first thing I noticed was the trash cans. They were at the curb because pickup was that morning. Something caught my eye. Sitting on top of the recycling bin, slightly tilted, was a brown paper bag. And sticking out of it was a corner of brown craft paper, the same craft paper I'd wrapped the chess set in. I got out of the truck and walked over like my legs were moving on their own. I pulled the bag open. There it was. The chess set, still in the wrapping. The twine was still tied. He hadn't even opened it again after the party. He'd just taken it off the table and thrown it away with the paper plates and used napkins. 3 months of work. Hours and hours of carving, sanding, finishing, engraving. A family history rendered in wood, sitting in the trash next to a crushed soda can and a paper plate smeared with frosting. I stood there staring at it. The garbage truck was maybe 2 blocks away. I could hear it grinding and beeping as it worked its way down the street. In about 5 minutes, the whole thing would have been compacted and hauled to the dump, and I never would have known. I picked it up. I held it. And then I looked up at the house. Through the kitchen window, I could see my dad, sitting at the table drinking coffee, wearing Brody's watch. He hadn't even noticed me in the driveway. He was just sitting there, content, wearing the gift from the son who mattered. I put the chess set in my truck. I got in. I drove away. I didn't grab my jacket. I didn't say good morning. I didn't cry or scream or punch the steering wheel. I just drove home in complete silence, carried the chess set inside, set it on my workbench, and sat down on the floor. I sat there for a long time. That was the last time I went to my parents' house. Hold on. I need to pause here for a minute because I love how Nolan handled this. Most guys would have stormed back inside, caused a scene, and given the family ammunition to call them dramatic. Nolan gave them nothing. Just silence. And here's what the family doesn't understand yet. Silence from someone who always showed up is the loudest message you can send. The smartest thing Nolan does next is he doesn't announce anything. He just vanishes. And pay attention to how long it takes this family to even ask why. That gap tells you everything about how invisible this man has been his entire life. All right, let's keep going. I didn't make an announcement. I didn't send a dramatic text or post something passive-aggressive on social media. I just stopped showing up. My mom called the next week to ask if I was coming to Sunday dinner. I said I was busy. She called the week after that. I said I was working on a commission. The 3rd week she called, and I let it go to voicemail. Eventually, the calls slowed down. She'd text now and then. The usual stuff. Miss you, honey, or Dad's grilling steaks this weekend if you want to come by. I'd respond with something short. Sounds good. We'll see. I never went. Brody called once, about a month in. Hey man, Mom says you've been MIA. Everything cool? I told him, yeah, just been swamped with work. He said, all right, don't be a stranger. And that was the end of it. He didn't push. He didn't ask again. That was Brody for you. He cared, but not enough to be inconvenienced by it. The thing that killed me, the thing I kept turning over in my head like a rock in a tumbler, was that nobody asked why. Nobody said, Nolan, did something happen? Are you upset about something? Nobody connected the dots. Nobody noticed that I left the party quietly and never came back. Because that's how invisible I was in that family. You can't miss what you never really saw. My dad didn't reach out at all. Not once. Not a call, not a text, not even a, hey, you alive? Through Brody or my mom. The man who supposedly loved me couldn't be bothered to pick up the phone a single time in 5 months. And the thing is, that silence told me more than any conversation could have. Because if your kid disappears for a month and you don't even notice, the problem isn't the kid. The problem is you never learned their name in the first place. About 6 weeks after the birthday, my mom finally showed up at my apartment. She brought a casserole because of course she did. Diane's answer to every emotional crisis was a 9x13 pan of chicken and rice. She sat on my couch and asked me what was going on. Why hadn't I been around? Was I sick? Was I in trouble? I almost told her. I was so close. The words were right there. I found the chess set in the trash, Mom. He threw it away. He didn't even unwrap it again. But I looked at her face, and I knew exactly what would happen. She'd get that soft, pained look. She'd say something like, oh, honey, I'm sure he didn't mean it like that. You know how your father is? He's just not good at expressing himself. And then she'd go home and tell my dad I was upset. And he'd roll his eyes and say I was being sensitive. And nothing would change. Nothing ever changed. So instead, I said, I'm fine, Mom. Just been really focused on work. I've got a lot of orders coming in and I'm trying to build something here. She seemed satisfied with that. She hugged me, told me she loved me, and left the casserole on the counter. I ate it over 3 days. It was good. My mom's cooking was never the problem. Here's what I didn't tell her. I'd found out something else during those 6 weeks. something I discovered entirely by accident while I was cleaning out my grandpa's cabin. Grandpa Earl had passed away about 4 years earlier, and the cabin had been sitting mostly untouched since then. My mom asked me to go out there and see what needed to be done before they decided whether to sell it. So I went. The cabin was exactly how I remembered it. Smelled like cedar and dust. His tools were still on the workbench. His books were still on the shelves. And in the back of the closet in his bedroom, inside an old lockbox, I found a stack of papers. Letters mostly. But buried in the pile was a document I'd never seen before. An earlier version of Grandpa Earl's will. Not the official one that had been filed with the estate, the one that left everything to my mom and her sister, Aunt Patty. This was a handwritten draft with a note clipped to it that said, "Updated version with attorney, August 2019. In this draft, Grandpa Earl had written a specific provision. The cabin and the 5 acres it sat on were supposed to go to me. Directly to me. Not to the estate, not to be split, not to be sold. To Nolan. Because, and I'm quoting from memory here, he's the only one who ever loved this place the way I did, and he's the only one who will take care of it." I sat on the edge of Grandpa's bed and read that line 4 times. The only one who ever loved this place the way I did. My grandfather saw me. He saw me when nobody else did, and he tried to make sure I'd have this place. But somewhere between this draft and the final version, that provision disappeared. I didn't know why. I didn't know if my mom or Aunt Patty had talked him out of it, or if the attorney had simplified things, or if Grandpa changed his mind. But the cabin was now technically my mom's, and she was talking about selling it. That discovery cracked open a door I'd been keeping shut. Because it wasn't just about the chess set anymore. It was about a lifetime of being overlooked. A lifetime of being the quiet one, the weird one, the one whose passions didn't count because they didn't come with a trophy or a paycheck that my dad could brag about. It was about watching Brody get the spotlight, the praise, the attention, the inheritance of my dad's approval, while I got head pats and afterthoughts. And now, the one place that ever felt like home, the cabin where my grandfather taught me to carve, the place where someone finally said, "You're enough," was about to get put on the market so my mom could split the proceeds with Aunt Patty. Something shifted in me during those weeks. I wasn't angry exactly. I was just done. Done performing. Done auditioning for a role I was never going to get cast in. I started making a plan. Not a revenge plan. Just a plan to take care of myself for once. Wait, hold on a second. This part is huge, and I need you guys to understand why. Nolan just found proof that his grandfather specifically wanted him to have that cabin. Wrote it down, signed it, told people, and somebody made it disappear. That's not just losing an inheritance. That's having the one person who ever saw you get overruled by the people who didn't. But here's what I respect about Nolan. He doesn't go scorched earth out of anger. He gets an attorney. He gathers evidence. He moves like a chess player, which is fitting. This man spent years learning strategy, and now he's applying it to his own life. Watch how this plays out. The next few months were the loneliest and most productive of my life. I threw myself into my work like a man possessed. Not because I was running from something, although I probably was, but because for the first time, I was building something entirely for myself without looking over my shoulder to see if anyone was watching. My online store had been doing okay before, but I'd always held back. I priced things too low because I didn't think people would pay what they were worth. I played small because that's what I'd been trained to do. Nolan doesn't take up space. Nolan is the quiet one. Not anymore. I redesigned my website, invested in better photography, raised my prices, listed a chess set for $1,200. It sold in 3 days. Made another for $1,500. Sold in a week. I started getting inquiries from collectors, interior designers, even a guy who ran a high-end gift shop in Nashville. By month 2, I was making more money from carving than I'd ever made at any job. Enough to quit the hardware store. Imagine that. The thing my dad dismissed as sandpaper and sawdust was turning into a legitimate business. I also started going to the cabin on weekends. My mom hadn't sold it yet, so it just sat there empty. I'd drive out on Saturday mornings and work at Grandpa's bench. The smell of the wood, the light through the window, the sound of nothing but birds and my own hands working. It felt like Grandpa was still there saying, "Slow down, Nolan. Let the wood tell you what it wants to be." During one of those weekends, I met Colleen. She lived about a mile down the road from the cabin in a small house, with a garden that looked like something out of a magazine. She was out front struggling with a fence post that had come loose in a storm. I stopped to help because that's what you do on a country road. You don't just wave and keep going. She was 30, a veterinarian who worked at a large animal practice about 20 minutes away. Dark hair, kind eyes, and this way of talking that was direct but never harsh. She thanked me for the fence post, offered me a glass of iced tea, and we ended up sitting on her porch talking for 2 hours. I told her about the carving. She told me about a horse she'd saved the week before that everyone else had written off. We didn't talk about my family, we just talked. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like someone was actually listening. We started seeing each other after that. She came to the cabin one day and watched me work. Didn't say anything for 20 minutes, just sat there observing. Then she said, "You disappear when you carve, like you go somewhere else. It's beautiful to watch." Nobody had ever said anything like that to me. Nobody had ever looked at what I did and called it beautiful. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom for a minute after that one. While my personal life was quietly blooming, I was also doing research. I'd taken the handwritten draft of Grandpa's will to an attorney named Franklin Morse. Semi-retired estate lawyer, with the demeanor of a man who'd seen every family fight the legal system could produce. He studied the document carefully and told me something that changed everything. The handwritten draft wasn't just a rough version. It was dated and signed. And according to Franklin, there were grounds to argue that the final will didn't properly reflect Grandpa's intent. There was a note in the margin that said, "Cabin to Nolan, separate from estate. Discussed with Patty, she agrees." If Aunt Patty had agreed, and it was removed without documentation, there was a legal basis to challenge. I wasn't trying to take anything from my mom or Aunt Patty. The estate had other assets. What I wanted was what Grandpa wanted, for the cabin to be mine. Franklin asked if anyone could confirm Grandpa's wishes. Grandpa's neighbor, a retired carpenter named Clifton Hale, had been his closest friend for 40 years. When I told him what I'd found, he said, "Your grandpa talked about that all the time. Said the cabin was for you. Said you were the only one in the family who understood what it meant to make something with your hands." He agreed to testify. The business was growing. Colleen was in my life. Franklin was working on the cabin. And for the first time, I wasn't building something to impress my father. I was building something for me. 5 months after the birthday party, Franklin filed a petition with the probate court. He'd discovered that the attorney who prepared the final will, a guy named Philip Dodd who had since retired, had notes in his file referencing a phone conversation with my mother. The notes said, "Diane called, discuss simplifying distribution, remove specific bequests, split everything equally." One phone call. My mother had called the attorney and asked him to simplify the will, which effectively erased my grandfather's specific wish that I receive the cabin. She knew. She had to have known. Grandpa told people about his plans. Clifton knew. Aunt Patty apparently knew. There's no way my mother didn't know. While the legal wheels were turning, my business exploded. A lifestyle blogger with 2 million followers posted an unboxing video of one of my chess sets. 800,000 views in a week. My inbox flooded. I had to set up a wait list. Within 2 weeks, I'd been contacted by a public television craft show, a gallery in Asheville, and a representative of a well-known actor who collects handmade chess sets. The commission budget was more than I'd made in some entire years of my life. Colleen was there through all of it. She never made it about her. One night she looked at me across the table and said, "You know you deserve all of this, right?" I told her I was starting to believe that. She said, "Good, because I'm not going anywhere, and I refuse to be with someone who doesn't know their own worth." Then my mom called. Not a text this time, a call. I picked up because it had been a while, and despite everything, she was still my mother. "Nolan, we need to talk." Her voice was tight. Not angry exactly, but wound up like she was trying very hard to stay calm. "I got a letter from a lawyer about your grandfather's cabin. Can you explain to me what's going on?" I kept my voice even. "I found a document in Grandpa's cabin, a handwritten version of his will that says the cabin was supposed to go to me. I took it to an attorney and he agrees there's a valid claim. That's what's going on." Silence. Then, "Nolan, you can't just go behind everyone's back like this. This is a family matter." "Mom, I've been gone for 5 months. Dad hasn't called me once. Brody texts memes. You send casseroles. Nobody in this family has asked me a single real question about my life in years. So, forgive me if I don't feel like running major life decisions through the family committee." She got quiet. Then she said, Your father is very upset. About the cabin, about all of it. He says you've been distant and disrespectful. I gripped the phone so hard I'm surprised it didn't crack. Distant and disrespectful. The man who threw away a 3-month labor of love without even looking at it twice thought I was being disrespectful. The man who hadn't dialed my number in 5 months thought I was being distant. I told her the lawyer would handle the legal stuff. If Dad wants to talk, he knows my number. Colleen came in afterward and sat next to me. She didn't say anything, just put her hand on my arm and waited. After a few minutes I said, "They're going to make me the villain in this story." She said, "Then let them. You know who you are." 2 days later, Brody called. Not casual this time. "Dude, what are you doing? Mom's freaking out. Dad's talking about getting his own lawyer. You're really going to sue the family over a cabin?" I told him I wasn't suing anyone. I was asking for what Grandpa wanted me to have. There's a document that proves it, a witness who confirms it, and notes from the original attorney showing the provision was removed after Mom called. Then he said, "Look, man, even if that's true, is it worth tearing the family apart?" And there it was, the question that every family scapegoat gets asked. Is it worth tearing the family apart? As if the family wasn't already torn. As if the tears weren't there long before I found a chess set in the garbage. As if being ignored for 32 years was somehow less destructive than asking for what was rightfully mine. I said, "Brody, I love you, but this family was torn apart a long time ago. You just didn't notice because you were always on the side that was holding together." He didn't have an answer for that. Okay, pause for a second. Is it worth tearing the family apart? I despise that question because it's only ever aimed at the person standing up, never at the person who caused the damage. Nobody asked Dale if trashing his son's gift was worth it. Nobody asked Diane if erasing her own father's wishes was worth it. But Nolan pushes back one time, and suddenly he's the problem. That's called a scapegoat dynamic, and Nolan just broke out of it. His response to Brody was flawless. "You didn't notice because you were on the side that was holding together." That's going to keep Brody up at night. Now Dale finally shows up. Let's see how this goes. The court date was set for 3 weeks out. Franklin was confident. Clifton was ready to testify. The documentation was solid. And for the first time in my life, I was going to walk into a room and demand to be seen. Not as Nolan the quiet one. Not as Nolan the disappointment. Just as Nolan, the grandson who was loved by a man who carved, and who carved because he was loved by that man. But before the court date, my dad decided to do something he hadn't done in 5 months. He decided to come see me. It was a Tuesday evening. I was in my workshop finishing a commission when I heard a truck pull into my driveway. I knew the sound of that engine. I'd grown up hearing it. My dad's old Ford. Dale was standing on my porch looking like he'd rather be anywhere else on the planet. He was wearing jeans, a flannel shirt, and Brody's watch. Of course he was wearing the watch. "Can I come in?" he said. I stepped aside. He walked into my living room and looked around like he was inspecting a job site. His eyes moved over the shelves where I displayed some of my pieces, the chess sets on the side table, the framed photos of me and Colleen. He didn't comment on any of it. "Sit down, Dad." He sat on the couch. I sat in the chair across from him. We looked at each other. He spoke first. "Your mother says you're trying to take the cabin." "I'm not trying to take anything. I'm trying to honor what Grandpa wanted." He waved his hand dismissively. Earl was sentimental. He said a lot of things in his last years. Doesn't mean they were all practical. He wrote it down, Dad. He signed it. He told his neighbor. He told Aunt Patty. He wanted me to have the cabin. The only reason I don't already have it is because Mom called the lawyer and had it removed. His jaw tightened. Your mother was trying to keep things fair. Fair for who? Because it sure wasn't fair for me, and it wasn't fair for Grandpa. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and pointed at me in that way he always did when he was about to deliver what he thought was an unassailable point. "Nolan, you're making a mountain out of a molehill. It's a cabin. It's old. Needs a new roof. The plumbing's shot. It's not worth what you think it is." "It's worth everything to me. That's the whole point. And the fact that you can't understand that is exactly why we're here." He said he didn't come to argue about a cabin. He came because everyone was upset, and he didn't understand what had gotten into me. That's when I decided to stop holding back. "You want to know what's gotten into me? I'll tell you. But you need to actually listen, not nod and wait for your turn to talk. Actually listen. He sat back and crossed his arms, which was Dale language for, I'm tolerating this. I spent 3 months building you a chess set for your 60th birthday. Every piece was hand-carved. The king was modeled after Grandpa Earl. The board was walnut and maple. I engraved a brass plate on the lid. It was the single best thing I've ever made. I put more of myself into that gift than anything I've ever created. He blinked. I could tell he barely remembered it. You opened it at the party, said, "Huh, that's something," set it on the table next to the cake plates, and spent the rest of the night showing off the watch Brody bought you. He shifted uncomfortably. And then the next morning I came back to get my jacket and found the chess set in the trash can at the curb, still wrapped. You threw it away, Dad. You didn't even give it to Goodwill or shove it in the basement. You put it in the garbage with the used paper plates. The room was dead silent. I watched his face go through about 4 different expressions in 5 seconds. Confusion, recognition, defensiveness, and then something I'd never seen on Dale before. Shame. I didn't know, he started. Didn't know what? That throwing away a handmade gift from your son might hurt? That treating someone like they're invisible for 32 years might have consequences? What exactly didn't you know, Dad? He uncrossed his arms. His hands went to his knees and just sat there. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him. Not physically. Dale was still a big man, but something inside him had contracted. I didn't mean to throw it away, he said quietly. Your mother was cleaning up, and I thought it was a decoration or something someone brought. It had a brass plate that said, "To Dad" on it. He closed his eyes. And for the first time in my life, I saw my father confronted with something he couldn't dismiss or wave away. The evidence was too clear. The hurt was too real. And I was sitting right in front of him, not flinching. I messed up, he said. Yeah, Dad, you did. Not just with the chess set. Every carving I brought home that you ignored. Every ribbon I won that you never hung up. Every conversation you steered back to Brody while I was mid-sentence. You spent my whole life telling me in 1,000 small ways that I didn't matter. And when I finally stopped showing up, you didn't even notice for 5 months. He didn't argue. He just sat there absorbing it. I could see him trying to figure out when I'd grown a spine. When the quiet kid who ate his mashed potatoes and took his dismissals with a thin smile had been replaced by this person sitting across from him, calm and immovable. And then he said something that surprised me. I don't know how to fix this. I don't know if you can, I said. But I know what's going to happen with the cabin. That property is going to come to me because that's what Grandpa Earl wanted. And I have the paperwork and the witnesses to prove it. And I'm going to restore it. I'm going to fix the roof and the plumbing and the porch, and I'm going to use it as my workshop. Because that's where I learned to be the person I am. And that person is someone worth knowing, Dad. You just never bothered to find out. He stood up slowly. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at the chess sets on my shelf. And I could see something shifting behind his eyes, like he was seeing them for the first time. Really seeing them. The detail, the artistry, the hours and hours of patient, precise work. These are beautiful, he said. And the way he said it, heavy and raw, like the words cost him something. I almost believed he meant it. Thanks, I said. You can let yourself out. He left. I stood at the window and watched his truck pull away. Colleen came out of the bedroom where she'd been giving us space. She put her arms around me from behind and said, "How are you?" I said, "I'm good. I'm actually really good." 3 weeks later, we went to court. Franklin presented the handwritten will. Clifton testified. The attorney's notes were entered into evidence. Aunt Patty, to my genuine surprise, testified that she remembered Grandpa talking about leaving the cabin to me and that she'd always been fine with it. The judge ruled in my favor. The cabin and the 5 acres were transferred to my name. My mother cried in the hallway afterward. Brody stood next to her looking uncomfortable. My dad wasn't there. He'd refused to come. But a week later, I got a package in the mail. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. Inside was a framed photo I'd never seen before. It was me at 12 years old, sitting at Grandpa Earl's workbench, holding up a small carved bird with the biggest smile on my face. On the back, in my father's handwriting, it said, I should have paid more attention. I put the photo on my workbench at the cabin, right where Grandpa would have wanted it, and that is where this story ends. The cabin's restored. Nolan proposed to Colleen on the porch. She said yes before he finished the question. Business is thriving. 6-month waitlist, national retailer deal. The chess set he pulled from the trash sits by the cabin window, a reminder of what he's worth. Dale came to the cabin once, didn't say much, just watched Nolan carve, squeezed his shoulder, and left. That's as eloquent as Dale gets. If you take one thing from this, you don't have to scream to be heard. Sometimes you just stop showing up for people who never showed up for you. Like the video, subscribe, I'll see you in the next one. Peace.